Good morning. It's good to see each and every one of you, and it's a pleasure to be back in New Zealand. This is my third time in New Zealand, and I always love coming here. I thought I'd begin by saying, you might ask yourself, why in the world would you come to New Zealand working at Wal-Mart? We get invited to participate in a lot of sessions, very busy, and we generally have to say no to most of them. But I have to tell you very sincerely that when we got the invitation, it was an easy yes because of the important role we believe that New Zealand plays in the 21st century food system. And so I hope that you recognize that role as well. If you read my bio, I spent 19 years at the Disney organization, and I'm now with Wal-Mart, 7 years, totally loving it. But I like to say I went from the happiest place on earth to the busiest place on earth, but no regrets. The other thing, I do a lot of public presentations, but I have to tell you, when I came to New Zealand, I got nervous. Because as I left the office, people were saying, Frank, you know, you're going to New Zealand and the folks down there are just so nice, and you know, Americans have lost some standing in the world. And so as I ran out the door, they said, make sure you go show them some American hospitality. And so I'm originally from New York. I, didn't know too much about hospitality growing up in the streets in New York, but worked for Disney for 19 years. They taught me what American hospitality was like, and Walmart does a pretty good job of it too. So what I'm going to try to do to make you like me and show you American hospitality, I have a stack of my business cards here. Now, I'm no longer with Disney, but when I was at Disney, I was a big shot, and I called. They said, Frank, this works. The boss is there. So afterwards, I got enough business cards for everyone in this room. Afterwards, come up and grab one of my business cards with my name on it. True story, this works. Take my business card to any of the main gates at any of the Disney theme parks, and my business card and $104 US will get you in. It's a bad joke, but that's what people think about Americans and American hospitality. I've been asked to talk to you about food safety culture, and I've titled the talk, Why a Food Safety Program or a Food Safety Management System Isn't Enough. Absolutely persuaded about this after 30 years in the profession. Begin by doing something a little less traditional. What do you think this picture has to do with food safety? HACCP? I heard HACCP, yep. The primary two answers that I get is HACCP, because Pillsbury invented HACCP for NASA. They didn't want astronauts to be going into space in these expensive aircrafts and having foodborne illness and crashing spaceships. Another answer that I get commonly is innovation. Neither one of those are the right answers. I want you to think about what you thought of when I asked that question, and I'm going to come back to this picture a little bit later in the presentation. Now, I was also asked to make this talk a very future-looking conversation, and I like to think of myself a bit as a food safety futurist. We should not be trying to predict the future of food safety, but trying to shape it. But any good futurist knows you have to understand and learn from the past, so I'm going to try to give you the history of food processing all in about 60 seconds. The beginning of time, or not the beginning of time, but around the year 2000, man, and I use the term man, affectionate ladies to refer to both genders, was a hunter and a gatherer. They would go hunt food, bring it home, and say, here, eat this food quickly before it spoils. Around 500 BC, man said that food spoils fast. Here, let's salt it, and we have in the literature our first hint of early preservation techniques. Around 1845, humans said that salt tastes bad. Here, place that food on ice, another form of preservation. 1850, that ice melts fast. Here, let's place that food in a refrigerator. Now, they're not the types of refrigerators or GE refrigerators that you and I have at home, but they were units or blocks that contained ice. Around 1864, the science starts to advance with the work of one of my heroes, Louis Pasteur. I don't have many heroes in life, but he's one of them. That food still spoils. Let's pasteurize it. 1980, the science takes a quantum leap, and scientists tell us that pasteurized food doesn't last long enough. Here, let's irradiate it. You can now have shelf-stable food for 40, 50 years. 1997, some consumer groups start telling us that irradiated food is bad for you. Here, eat this all-natural fresh stuff. And at the turn of the century, we're hearing that all-natural stuff goes bad. Here, eat this food quickly before it spoils. Now, it's intended to be humorous, but there's a lot of truth to this, right? We want to go back to the good old days when things were done and everything was natural. And the reality, for many of you out here in the audience, there are a lot of pressures on you in this new way of producing food with minimal processing, minimal preservation, minimal techniques. In the US, we've seen outbreaks and deaths because moms thought they were doing something right by feeding their children unpasteurized juices. And in the US, we have a renewed interest, I don't know about New Zealand, with people wanting to drink unpasteurized milk, forgetting the lessons learned public health in the past. And so these are real pressures that we're facing. We heard earlier today that today's food system is very complex. Consumers are no longer growing food. In the early 20th century, a lot of people were still in some way, shape, or form involved with food production. But today, the majority of people are very far removed from food production, and they go to the supermarket. And today's supermarket looks a lot like this. I visited a couple of your retail markets yesterday. They look like this. Tens of thousands of different food products, frozen. You've got fresh fruits and vegetables from around the world. You've got locally grown, a real interest in the United States and abroad, fresh meat and poultry. You have whole meal replacement solutions. In the 1980s, in the US, there were about 20,000 food products in a typical grocery store. How many SKUs, food SKUs, do you think exist in the typical grocery store today? 50,000 and greater. And that number is going to grow. We expect it'll probably reach 100,000. And think of the combination of digital and physical, where you can now go online and order any food that you want from anywhere in the world at any time. And so the food system is getting real complex, and we have an obligation to manage these risks. Now, let me tell you, I think the benefits of today's modern food system far outweigh the risks. You know, affordable food at a fraction of your own dollar, the availability, but nevertheless, there are some unique risks. We also know, I don't have to persuade this audience, that food safety is top of mind. These are the foodborne statistics from the United States. 48 million cases of foodborne disease, 128,000 hospitalizations, 3,000 deaths. Bottom line, for most developed countries, and I've looked at the stats, it's generally 1 in 4 to 1 in 5 to 1 in 6 individuals will experience foodborne illness. But things are changing. What do these three things have in common? PFGE, which stands for pulse field gel electrophoresis, which is basically just doing a genetic fingerprint on a microbial isolate, credit cards, and Google. What do these three things have in common? Traceability. It's a good answer. They're all enhancing our ability to detect foodborne illness. You've heard of the PCA outbreak in the United States, peanut butter. That outbreak started with a couple of cases, 2 cases of Salmonella typhimurium, a very common salmonella, which in years past, people would say, hey, we see Salmonella typhimurium all the time. No need to worry about it. But what do we do today? We do genetic fingerprints. We put it on the information highway. We send it to the CDC. And you have scientists looking to see if there's matches or clusters. And lo and behold, before it was said and done, there were 800 plus cases, many deaths. And it was basically the straw that broke the camel's back and gave us the Food Safety Modernization Act. This outbreak or this incident would have happened 10 years ago, the outbreak would have been undetected. We would be sitting here today as though it never happened. Here's an outbreak that occurred in Denmark. Danish epidemiologists had no clue what was causing the illnesses. It was a shigotoxin-producing E. coli. Somebody came up with a clever idea. Well, let's look at what ill consumers had purchased using credit card records. And using credit card records, they found out that everyone that was ill had purchased a particular brand of sausage, tested the sausage, same outbreak strain in the sausage. Lo and behold, in the patient's outbreak solved. And many of you have heard of the Listeria outbreak in Canada, the maple leaf outbreak. Many deaths associated with maple leaf. Some researchers went back and looked at that outbreak retrospectively, and they said, hey, had we been looking for what Canadian consumers were searching on search engines such as Google, we would have detected the outbreak long before traditional health reporting. And so we're getting really good at detecting foodborne outbreaks and food problems. And that's a good thing. Here's the analogy. One analogy I really want you to remember from today. There's one analogy, and this analogy becomes truer the longer I'm in the profession. Each and every one of you in this audience, anybody involved with food production anywhere in the world, you're in this race. And the race is between your ability to prevent foodborne illness and public health's ability to detect. Now that's a good thing. I'm all for public health detection. But they're beating us in this race. And that's why I've intentionally staggered these photos. Detection is outpacing prevention. And so to win the race, what industry and anybody involved with food production has to do, you have to accelerate prevention. If you think you're going to do food safety this year or next year the way you did it last year, you might lose. And I would suspect there might be some food companies in the audience that have been involved in outbreaks and they just don't know about it. In the US, we just had an outbreak with Listeria in ice cream. Bluebell, I don't know if you've heard of that. A company that's been in existence 108 years. 108 years, never had a recall, never had an illness, never had a problem. And guess what, last year, linked with the Listeria outbreak. What changed with Bluebell? I would suggest that nothing really changed at Bluebell other than we can now make the invisible visible and we can find the needles in the haystack. And so you have to accelerate prevention. So that's my admonition or call to action. And the last trend, I just wanted to give you a couple of big trends because the why matters before we pivot and start talking about culture. What do these three things have in common? Political scandals. Oh, by the way, I hear you don't have them in New Zealand, but we have them in the US. The financial crisis and food scares. What do these three things have in common?
Weak oversight.
Weak oversight? That's a good answer. They all lead to this, what I think is a societal global trust bust. People becoming less trusting of institutions, less trusting of government, less trusting of executives, less trusting, the surveys say, the Edelman Trust Barometer surveys in countries around the world, less trusting of a person like you. You are less trusted today than you were last year just because you're living in this era. And for this audience, I put this slide in here because I think it's really important. I haven't seen anything published in the literature, but this was a survey that we did at Walmart with what we call Walmart moms. And after an incident, we asked them, how long do food warnings or food scares influence kind of your purchasing decisions? And you can see the bottom line here, the headline is the country of origin suffers the longest, the retailers suffer the shortest. This is the question that we asked them. How long do contamination warnings or food scare affect your relationship with the following? And as you can see, we asked them the retailer, the type of product, the manufacturer, and country of origin. And then we asked them, hey, 1 week or less, a month, 2 to 3 months, 4 months, and we calculated an average. But what I wanted you to see there is country of origin, on average 12 weeks, but almost half of the people said 4 months or greater. Now, why did I bring this to this audience? You guys have an incredible reputation of providing and producing high-quality, safe products. But for all of you in this audience, let me tell you how I see this. When it comes to food safety in New Zealand, all of the companies win or lose together. And so I hope that you're thinking about food safety not as a competitive issue. Let me say it again. When it comes to food safety in New Zealand, all the companies in New Zealand win or lose together. And so I'm really encouraged by MPI in putting on this event for food manufacturers. So I could go on with the why, but there's a changing food system with new risks. Foodborne disease surveillance is getting better. There's emerging pathogens, immunocompromised individuals, at-risk population, consumer trust bust. We didn't talk about social media. If we have time, I'd love to talk about the role that social media is playing. Food fraud and authenticity, you got some of the world's best experts here. They're all challenges to food safety. All unique challenges to food safety at the dawn of the 21st century. Now, how do we get beyond that? What's the way forward? Now, when I ask food safety professionals, and I've talked to a lot of them around the world, these are the three primary answers I get. After you do a risk assessment and rules, these are the tools that we like to pull out of our tool bag. We say, we're going to train. And Frank, we got really good training today. We got manager certification, risk-based training. At the end of the day, it really doesn't impress me that much. Some people, well, Frank, we're going to do better inspections or more inspections. We're going to do risk-based inspections. We're going to do GFSI-based certifications, and we even require it. But at the end of the day, that doesn't impress me either. Some people say, well, we're going to do micro-testing. We've got rapid methods now. We're going to use bigger sampling plans. But we've been testing foods for a long time, so that doesn't impress me. Pause to think about it. Despite the fact that we've trained tens of millions of employees around the world, when I say we, the food system, despite the fact that we've conducted tens of millions of inspections, despite the fact that we've conducted hundreds of millions of food tests, food safety is still a major public health challenge. Why is that? Well, I think one of the reasons is, I love this quote by Abraham Maslow, a psychologist. If the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. And I believe food safety professionals carry around those three tools: the inspection tool, the testing tool, and the training tool. And I'm going to suggest that you need more tools in your tool bag. How are those tools working? How are those tools working out for you? Are they helping you win the battle against foodborne disease? Anybody want to answer? I see some people waving no, not really. Well, in the US, the ultimate scorecard or scorekeeper on whether we're winning the battle against foodborne disease is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They published this report called FoodNet, Incidence of Illnesses per 100,000 population. And what you can look on the right-hand side, you see those faces? We'd like for them all to be smiley faces, but you can see there's a lot of sad faces and neutral faces. And by the way, this was the first year we got some smiley faces. For the past 7 years, there have been no smiley faces. So obviously, it's not necessarily working. If you think about somebody using a cutting board, cutting raw meat, using that same cutting board and then cutting salad, what is that? Cross-contamination? Yes, but I view it as a human behavior. How about if I'm trying to improve the food safety performance of Wal-Mart, an organization with 2.2 million associates around the world? What am I trying to do? Trying to change and influence the behaviors, the choices, the values, the beliefs of 2.2 million people. Ministry of Primary Industries. If you're trying to improve the food safety performance of food companies here in New Zealand, what are you trying to do? Trying to influence and change the behaviors of a lot of people. So if there was one equation I would use to define food safety, it would be this. Food safety equals behavior. Nothing more, nothing less. Food safety equals behavior. And quite frankly, as food safety professionals, we're not really good at changing behavior. So how are we going to do that? People then tell me, hey, Frank, we're going to create a great program. Our program's going to be big. If that's your response, I think it's well-intentioned but misguided, because your job really should be, as you've heard earlier today, is to create a food safety culture, not a food safety program, and they're different. So in the time that I have remaining, I'm going to go real quickly to answer 4 basic questions. What is culture? Because the words we use are important. Why is it so important? Who creates it? And then I'm going to give you a couple of points on how. Now, this is pleasant for me because I'm talking to people that want to hear a message on culture. Over the years, I've gone to some very technical conferences, and I want to talk about culture. And literally, no exaggeration, I've had people come up to me afterwards and say to me, Frank, why are you talking about culture? This is a food safety conference. We're here talking about the hard sciences, and you're talking about the soft sciences. We're talking about the hard stuff, you're talking about soft stuff. Well, let me tell you, after working in 2 big organizations, I'm absolutely convinced it's the soft stuff, that's the hard stuff. Because I can find a lot of people that can write HACCP plans. I can find a lot of people that know everything they need to know about. And I see many people in the audience nodding because you lead organizations. It's the soft stuff, that's the hard stuff. So let me go back and just give you the definition. This was a definition written by a colleague of mine at the University of South Florida. She's one of the leaders in a behavioral change model called social marketing. You probably have heard about it, using same commercial marketing principles to change behavior that Coke and Disney use to try to get you to buy and shop their products. But this is one of my favorite definitions. Culture is shared patterns of thought and behavior that characterize a social group, which are learned through socialization process and persist through time. Shared patterns of thought and behavior. What do you think in that organization about food safety? If you're ill, do you stay home? Do you wash your hands before working with food? It's learned through socialization process. In other words, you don't have to be taught it necessarily. Food safety is caught, not only taught. You go into the organization, there's this principle of social norm, you see what other people are doing, and you automatically do it. And if it's really part of the culture, it persists through times. Leaders like Frank Yiannas can come and go, but the organization will still have a strong food safety culture because it's part of what you believe. Why the focus on culture? Why is this Yiannas guy talking so much about culture? And I want you to stop and think of a major catastrophic event that you're aware of. And what was the root cause? Was it faulty design? Was it operator error? Was it improper training? Or was it organizational culture? In all of the big catastrophic events of our day, when smart men and women investigated, what do you always see in the headlines in the paper? It was the culture of the institution that allowed this to happen. It's always about culture. And so I told you at the beginning I'd come back to this picture. This is the Space Shuttle Columbia. In 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia took off from Kennedy Space Center. Shortly after takeoff, you see 2 tanks on the sides of that center tank. Those are fuel tanks. And they have a foam insulation material. Shortly after takeoff, some of that foam insulation material came off and hit the bottom edge of the left wing of the shuttle. And the shuttle is lined with thermal insulation tile to protect it from heat upon reentry into the Earth's atmosphere. NASA engineers weren't sure whether there was damage. Make a long story short, they decided to bring the shuttle back home after kind of agonizing over it. And shortly upon reentry into the Earth's atmosphere, that left wing started to experience a tremendous amount of heat. The wing started to vibrate, it disintegrated, the entire shuttle disintegrated into tiny pieces, and all 7 astronauts on board tragically died. If you're an American, you remember that day. You probably remember exactly where you were. I was with my daughter at a horseback riding lesson, because it was a blow to our nation's psyche. NASA assembled the brightest men and women to investigate how in the world can this happen to something that we're so prideful of. And they concluded, in our view, the NASA organizational culture had as much to do with this accident as the phone. Isn't that amazing? And I would suggest that there are a lot of food outbreaks that are as much or more about culture than they are really the science behind it. When the PCA outbreak happened in the US, some professional associations came out with publications about salmonella survival in low moisture food. Totally missed the boat. It wasn't about, we knew salmonella can survive in low moisture food. Who creates culture? Organizational cultures are created by leaders, and one of the most decisive functions of leadership may well be the creation and management, and if and when necessary, the destruction of culture. A culture starts at the top and flows downward. It doesn't go from the bottom up. And the leaders of the organization have a responsibility to create food safety culture. Now, if you're a CEO in the room, it's a primary responsibility for you. If you're a senior to mid-level leader, don't think you're off the hook, because you have an obligation to create culture in your organizations as well. But it's the leadership function. Here's a quote by a very wise Greek philosopher. Food safety culture is a choice. Why do I say that? Because what I've seen over the years is that organizations today that have the strongest food safety cultures are the organizations that have had the catastrophic events. And what I'd like to see, and all of you would like to see, is organizations to get out in front of this and create strong food safety cultures so you prevent the catastrophic event. And so that's really the goal of this session. No two great food safety cultures are alike, but they have similar core attributes. So I'm going to give you 5 core attributes and some tips real quickly. You don't have to do it this way, but tips that we've used at Walmart and Disney. These are the 5 attributes that I have found organizations that have strong food safety cultures. One is they create food safety expectations. Everyone in the organization knows what's expected of them. They educate and train their associates. They communicate food safety frequently. They establish goals and measurements. And they create consequences, both positive and negative. Culture isn't something that happens by accident. You heard that earlier. You have to intentionally work on it. You can view it as a continuous improvement process because you also heard it never ends. You have to continue working on it. But let me give you some examples. It starts by creating very clear food safety performance expectations. What's the #1 reason why employees don't do what they're supposed to do? Because they're dummies? Study after study, the #1 reason why employees don't do what they're supposed to do is because they just don't know what to do. And whose fault is that? It's us, leaders. For people not know how to produce safe food, it's not their fault, it's our fault. And so one of the things we've done at Walmart is we've simplified food safety and we've created the food safety high 5. Be clean, be healthy. You see we communicate it with 5 symbols so people can recognize it regardless of their native language. Keep it cold, keep it hot. Don't cross-contaminate, wash, rinse, and sanitize, and cook it and chill it. And by using this methodology, we've had an 8-fold increase in associate knowledge in just 3 short years. Another thing that companies that have strong food safety cultures do is they link food safety to their company's values and beliefs. Food safety is not a priority. I remember arriving at Walmart at the first incident, corporate communications wanted to send a media response that said, food safety is a priority. And I said, no, we're not going to say that. And they said, what do you mean we're not going to say food safety is a priority? No, priorities change. Are your priorities today the same priorities that you had 2 years ago? No. But your values and beliefs generally don't change, and so it has to be part of the values system. And so most organizations have values, and we've linked food safety as part of our values and belief system. Walmart has 3 basic beliefs, and that's how we talk about food safety, the 3 basic beliefs in food safety. I have yet to see somebody come to a Walmart store really excited about complying with the FDA food code. But they understand it's because we respect the individual that we care about their safety. At Disney, we did the same thing. We created the safety beliefs. That one, we used a behavioral science technique called commitment and consistency. We got 200 VPs from Disney, brought them into a room like this, had HR facilitate it, and 200 executives at Disney created those safety beliefs that you see documented in that bottom corner. What does that do for you? You have this principle of commitment. If they wrote it and stated it, now they're obligated to behave in a way that's consistent with that. And so that was a brilliant move that we did at Disney. And there's some other things. Let me move on to educate and train. That's another core attribute. Training must be focused on changing behavior. What I find is people do training and education for a couple of reasons. The main reason companies that I visit do training and education is because it's a regulatory requirement. Wrong reason. Another good reason is to impart skills and knowledge. Good reason. Change attitudes. Good reason. But to influence and change behavior, best reason. And you need to know how to do that. And we need to know that there's a difference between education and training. Education is why food safety is important. Training is how you do food safety. Some of you are looking at me a little bit confused on the education and training, so let me see if I can do this. How many of you have teenagers at home? Okay, what would you rather them receive at school? Sex education or sex training? Okay, these folks in New Zealand are really smart. They're different, and we have to do both. That's food safety, I mean education and training. And so we have a host of training and education strategies. And we use behavioral science principles. Rather than talking about statistics, people aren't motivated by statistics. Here's a study done by Lowenstein who looked at starving children in Africa. And guess what? They could talk about the number of people that are starving in Africa, ask you to donate. People didn't donate much. When they talked about one little girl and told her story and then asked people to donate, people donated a lot more. And so I would suggest when it comes to food safety, talk about real world incidents, real cases of foodborne disease, and get people's attention. And I can go on with a host of different strategies for education and training. Communicate food safety. Here's the deal. Communication and culture are two sides of the same coin. If your employees do not hear you talking about communication each and every day, they know it's not important to you, and they know it's not part of your culture. So I like to say bombard your associates or employees with food safety sound bites. We do weekly communication messages for the leaders, signs and symbols. We bring in celebrities because celebrities have influence and power. And we also use frontline associates. You need to learn, I don't know in the New Zealand culture, who's an authority, who's more likely to influence others. I'm going to show you in the bottom left-hand corner, there's an associate. He's a real employee. And through a talent edition, we selected him to be somewhat of a spokesperson for us. And he delivers a lot of our food safety messages, not Frank Yiannas. And I want to show a video that we play at Wal-Mart. If you could run that video for me, please.
Not only does Wal-Mart have great prices, but we're serving up safe and affordable food. And I love food. You love food? I love food. We like to keep our customers happy and healthy by keeping our cold foods cold and our hot foods hot. That's hot. We keep it cold and we keep it hot for everyone's safety. Hey, it's cold back here. Ooh, ice cream. Food safety high five. It begins with you.
Why do I share that with you? Because we're bombarding our associates with food safety sound bites. This is a video that loops throughout the day, many times a day, and we have a series of videos. This one just happens to be on high five number 2. But we leverage behavioral science principles. You notice Frank Yiannas isn't delivering that message? You've all heard of this phrase, birds of a feather flock together. What does that mean? People tend to listen and believe people like them. And so we have frontline associates talking, because if Darrell says it, it must be important. And so in all of the things that we're doing, we're combining food science and behavioral science. 2 more real quickly goals or pillars: establish goals and measurements, create scorecards. Here's one admonition or request I have of you. I know many of you are doing food safety checks on paper. If you can, convert it to digital information. Make the business case. Really go after it aggressively. I promise you it will transform your business. Food safety information on paper is a dead end. Food safety in digital form is the beginning of meaningful action. You have to have leading indicators, but I want to talk about this digital information because what it allows you is to go to big data. How many of you have heard of the UPS story? UPS, United Parcel Service, big fleet of trucks, United States, deliver packages. They came up with this policy, no left-hand turns. Has anybody heard about it? Because all of their fleets is digitized, they know how fast their trucks are going, they know how much fuel they have in their tanks, they know when they're idling. And their data scientists analyzed all that data, and they said, hey, whenever we're making left-hand turns, we're stalling, we're burning a lot of gas, we're wasting a lot of time. And so they came up with the policy, no left-hand turns. Save tons of money, save tons of time, reduce carbon emissions. Think about all of the food safety checks that you're doing that are not in digital form. What are the left-hand turns in your food safety management system? I bet you there are left-hand turns in your food safety management system. And so by converting to digital, what we have discovered is an amazing amount of questions that we should have been asking. We just didn't know, but now we see them. And I'll give you one example, cooking of a rotisserie chicken. There was a retailer in the US that had an outbreak with rotisserie chicken because they undercooked it. So we asked ourselves, we're a big seller of rotisserie chicken, how are we doing? So we looked, we have 6,000 stores across the US. We said, how are we doing on rotisserie chicken? First place we looked is, how many times did regulators come in and inspect us? They came in hundreds of times, but they had checked rotisserie cooking 10 times, just because the ovens weren't opening. We hired a third party to check our rotisserie cooking 100 times. But because we have that Spark system, in 1 month, we had 1.4 million rotisserie chicken temperatures. And so N equals all. Last one, create consequences for food safety. And you should have a tiered recognition process. And you might need negative or negative consequences. Bottom line is all of the behavioral studies suggest that positive consequences should outweigh negative consequences on a ratio of 4 to 1 to 10 to 1. It works better in the classroom. It works better in the manufacturing plant floor. So create ways to recognize employees for doing the right thing. Those are the pillars. I had to go through them real quickly. A couple of weekends ago, I was emailing with Bill Marler. I don't know how many in New Zealand know Bill Marler, but he's a very famous attorney in the US. He's sued a lot of companies. I've been at times on the other side of the fence, but we remain cordial. And in an email, he said to me, he said, Frank, it's all, and I told him I was going to use this. He said, it's always about culture. He said, in the 30 years I've been in practice, behavior and culture, has been the cause of every outbreak that I've litigated. I thought that was pretty telling. So with that, I want to sincerely thank you for the work that you're doing here. I want to thank MPI for the invitation in this session, for providing safe and affordable food and your desire to do so that people in New Zealand and elsewhere around the world can live better. Thank you very much.